Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and it looks like WoW's sub numbers have finally leaked. Recently, a conference took place where a variety of game developers went in to share some of the thoughts as well as some of their experiences while developing a variety of titles. And some of the WoW devs were there as well, giving us new graphs and charts showing us the trend of subscriber numbers from expansion to expansion. But these charts give us so much more information besides sub numbers, as it shows us how well retail and classic versions of World of Warcraft have been performing over the years, and just how disastrous the last expansion of Shadowlands may have truly been. But it also leaves a lot of players hopeful for the future, especially with things like War Within as well as the World Soul Saga, things like the Cataclysm Classic, as well as the future endeavors that Blizzard may tackle when it comes to their Classic Plus or even Season of Discovery. And today I wanted to go over all of these trends that came out recently and highlight how currently it seems that both retail and classic in 2024, both versions of WoW are currently on a rise when it comes to the overall popularity as we speak. But right before we get into some what I think is potentially really good news, most of you guys watching these kind of update videos are still not subscribed. However, the more of you remind, the more of you do, so let's keep it going. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell if you're watching these videos anyway, especially if you want to get more regular content regarding Dragonflight 10.2.5 or any future updates for patches like 10.2.6 or the War Within Alpha. So for this video, I want to primarily focus on the trends rather than any specific numbers. Subscriber numbers used to be a public knowledge that Blizzard provided to us every couple of months, though without their direct input, we could only speculate or try to guesstimate sub numbers for ourselves using the data points given. The sub numbers given in Bellular's chart might be as close to accurate as we can really get it, but I think the numbers themselves are not nearly as important as the actual trends themselves. This chart gives us a great idea of how expansions pan out in terms of numbers of players and how these trends are affected from expansion to expansion. For Legion, we see as our very first data point, we had a very strong start, an expansion that is beloved by so many in the community. Legion, like most expansions, has a big explosion of popularity at the very beginning, and after some time these numbers trail off until the next expansion announcement. With BFA, we see yet another spike like before, though not nearly as big as a spike in Legion. And looking back, BFA was definitely not nearly as bad as most people remember it, but it certainly had quite a few problems muddying the entire experience. From Azerite gear, Azerite power farming, endless island expeditions, a PvP system where you had to do dungeons and raids to obtain the best gear for PvP combat. On top of the Essence system, the Legendary Cloak system, and Corrupted gear, there was definitely quite a bit to dislike about BFA. It was a system-heavy expansion that relied heavily on borrowed powers. All of its systems were fairly grindy also, and unless you kept up with all of it from the very start of the expansion, coming back to the game after a patch or two left you fairly confused. With so many different systems and dailies you had to maintain in order to keep power progression of each of your characters was just a lot. Out of nowhere came Classic WoW with a massive spike that exploded WoW's popularity metrics and solidified Classic WoW as a solid competitor that carried the rest of the BFA timeline. Classic Vanilla was truly special. The entire experience felt electric. Everyone I knew at the time was playing the game, and it felt like a real lightning in a bottle type moment that usually happens once every so often for so many games. For Shadowlands, we saw that the hope was very real, with the expansion having a bigger launch than Legion, rivaling Classic WoW's launch popularity as far as the trends are concerned. And the early days of Shadowlands was peak World of Warcraft. Everyone I knew at the time was playing it, grinding out their covenants, working on the legendaries, or blasting through RBGs with their full moon Convoke Night Fate druids. But soon after, we got a super extended long season 1 that lasted for 9 months, which was unheard of, followed by 9.1, the patch that brought us Korthia, which wasn't nearly as exciting as some of the other zones Blizzard has given us before, on top of Blizzard having a ton of internal issues at the time. Shadowlands was truly a cursed timeline, with so many players bouncing out of the expansion and some for good. During that time, we even saw the launch of TBC and Wrath. However, that line of trends stayed flat even during those two historic classic launches, which for many actually was very surprising to see and can mean one of two things. One outcome could be that classic TBC and Wrath were able to garner an audience but nowhere near as exciting and electric as the launch of Vanilla WoW. making both of them look like a complete flop. Or we have the outcome too. Shadowlands was in such a desperate decline, and so much worse than anyone could have expected. And the only thing that stopped that line from going off the deep end was TBC and Wrath barely managing to keep things stable for a time. Personally, I think it's the outcome too. Shadowlands had a great start, but overall it was definitely a low point for World of Warcraft. Just ask anybody that played that expansion. It was an X-Pack that had a lot of potential, but missed the mark when it comes to things such as storytelling, gameplay, and community engagement. During their most recent GDC, the Senior Vice President of WoW, General Manager John Haidt, shared a slide which highlights lessons learned behind their approach with WoW over the last few expansions and helps highlight the clear problems which created the low point that was Shadowlands. In the panel, they state that the afterlife setting of Shadowlands wasn't accessible for players, since we aren't going to new worlds or discovering new islands. Instead, we're exploring the afterlife of WoW as we know it. The Jailer was this all-knowing being, but they never explained how he obtained that much knowledge, how he was always a step ahead of the player character, and how he was able to orchestrate his release from the Maw, citing the events of Legion, Battle for Azeroth, and even the day Arthas picked up Frostmourne as the events that led to his return. And for most players, his whole reasoning behind being the big bad of that expansion was severely underdeveloped. Shadowlands was also very system heavy and didn't allow player classes to evolve. Covenants, legendaries, and soulbinds didn't bring enough variety to the game, and their lack of community engagement and communication alienated so many that loved WoW that they even left the game for good this time around, instead of coming back for the next expansion. Which leads us into Dragonflight, which did not have the same hype after the last two expansions being flops. Dragonflight itself as an expansion felt exciting, but didn't feel like it had the war in Warcraft. But regular content updates, regular class changes, evergreen features that will carry on into the next expansion, class revamps with the talents making a return, constant communication meant that the drop-off was not nearly as monumental as every other expansion we've seen so far. BlizzCon on top of it was also fantastic and created a lot of hype for the War Within and the entire World Soul Saga, as well as classic SoD, leaving a lot of players very optimistic about the future of WoW with a ton of content to look forward to. And classic SoD should be credited for this because it helped bring so many players back to the game. It's a fantastic achievement for Blizzard to be able to take the classic idea of vanilla WoW and modifying it with the community in mind, letting players explore for all of the glyphs and runes in order to create new character builds and play the original game but in a very different way. However, Classic may not be the only catalyst that led to this rise in popularity, as Dragonflight's Season 3 has been so far crushing Season 1 and Season 2. Based on all of the numbers that we have to collect from WoW logs, Reddit.io, as well as other websites that track player engagement, Mythic Pluses in Season 3 got a ton more runs, overshadowing the earlier Dragonflight seasons. And even the current Season 3 raid of Emergicil has had the highest retention of players so far for this expansion. Which leads us to the current point of Dragonflight and Classic SoD, where our numbers are about the same as the height of Legion. However, depending on who you ask, whether you're talking to classic players or retail players, it doesn't feel the same, does it? This is because the community is super fragmented, because so many of us are playing Classic Wrath and leveling a character 4 in preparation to Cataclysm. Others are still working on the character in retail, trying to go for KSM, AOTC, or accomplish their PvP goals in Dragonflight, or plundering the Arathi for doubloons, or simply just playing SoD. So many players are playing the game, they're just playing a different version of the game. Compare that to Legion, which was a juggernaut on its own and produced the same kind of numbers all by itself, like a Goliath holding this massive community upon its titanic shoulders, all on its own. And I'm not necessarily saying one is better than the other, but the feeling is definitely not the same. And it's good to see that WoW has a growth, but it's a different kind of growth than we experienced it in previous expansions. And this growth should be noted also because this growth seems like it's going to continue, it's trending upwards, and it's just going to keep getting better and better. Where the War Within is taking the World Soul Saga in a whole nother direction compared to where we've been so far, while still leaning into the things that fans want to see. They're putting the war back into Warcraft with some actual credible threats, going back to places that are fan favorite, like how they're returning back to Quathalas at Midnight, or Old War for the Titans in the expansion after. They're bringing back so much more emotion and so much more reason to care for some of the fan favorite characters and some of the big events that are looming over the horizon. And it seems that they finally understand the direction that the game has to head into following Dragonflight, which has been able to establish aspects of WoW that players genuinely like, with evergreen features, better class identity, better gear progression, and ult friendliness. All they have to do is expand on those features while hammering down the story down the line. And with the things like delves as well as warbands, all these old friendly benefits as well as hero talents of how they're trying to expand our classes forward, all hero talents are subject to change for now, it seems that they're at least taking steps in the right direction. And this gets me excited and hopeful for things like War Within, as well as Classic Cataclysm, as well as what they're going to do next with Season of Discovery. And it's exciting for me that things like SoD actually panned out really well. Their experimental new game mode or a way to re-experience Classic with a different style might mean that they may have more ideas similar along the same lines going forward. And with them trying out things like Plunder for retail recently, with so many players jumping into a brand new mode, gets me excited for some of the ideas and concepts and game modes that they could create going forward. Overall, I see this chart as very good news and one that gets me super optimistic about the future, and I think this is something the community really needed after the damage that was left by Shadowlands. And hopefully in the future we'll see more players coming back to future experiences that they create, whether it is the new retail expansion or whatever other journeys they take with Classic WoW. But for now, that's going to be my entire video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.